Hi everyone, welcome back to Scrap Happiness Studio on this beautiful snowy day. I'm so glad you're here to explore with me, and I want you to know I'm learning every bit as much as you are, because whenever you teach you have to rethink what you're doing, why you're doing it, and I'm trying to follow my own advice about working to the size of your cutting area. I actually have a large cutting area, but I'm trying to force myself to work in smaller units because it's easier, really. So I did finish up the giant placemats from last week, and these are going to be very practical in our household because we have a cat that I can't keep off the table. For sanitary reasons, I like to fold, when we're not eating, fold the placemats in half and then only have them open when we're actually eating. And I have Fiestaware, so I'm sure I have dishes that will go with these beautifully. So last week I said we were going to be playing with these dragonfly blocks from the deep curves lesson. And so the first thing I did was pick out some I drew some designs, kind of abstract or quilty designs. And then I thought, well, dragonflies would be found in a wetland. So I pulled together some fabrics to make cattails or sedges in a, oh, sedges, that's a good idea. Sedges in a wetland. And I pulled together, so I wanted green plant life in blue backgrounds. And one of my favorite fabrics is by Marcia Dursey, and I thought this really looks like sunlight sparkling on water, so I thought that would be really good. And then I pulled together some fabrics that I have a lot of, so that I could intersperse them. And then I pulled up this one fabric that I painted that I really hope I could use in here, but maybe not. But we'll see. And I also just came across some yarns that might be fun to couch on later. Remember, when we're working this way, what we're doing is making a good basic composition or painting, because we can always decorate the heck out of it later on. So now I'm going to switch over to my sewing machine. And oh, one other thing. So in designing to your size of your surface area, I know you can't see all this, but I have some very tall seagrass units that I pieced already. And then I'm thinking I could probably make one rectangular unit out of these ones by piecing more fabric onto these blocks and then overlapping these units and recutting. So that's my thinking at this point. So we're going to insert a body into our dragonfly. And so what we're going to do is piece a piece of this onto this, and we ignore this half for now. I should have pressed this, but oh well. And we want the fabric that we're inserting to be the same length. If we're going to go all the way across, we want this to be the same length so we know where to start and stop sewing. So I'm going to do a little nick here so I know that. And the same up here. And we're cutting these fabrics at the same time because we know then that the curves will match each other. So I don't need this whole piece. Anyway, I'm going to run over. Oh, wait, actually, look, I didn't get that because I was too lazy to press. So let's try that again. I was trying to be too frugal of this extremely fun, sparkly fabric. Okay, remember the goal is to piece this big chunk of fabric onto here. I generate kind of a lot of shreds. And it's always good to get that one pin in. And you want to smooth it out in your hand to make sure that you can get to your pin. And I have actually I should put this curve on the top because it's easier to use that concave. And remember, the tighter the curve, the smaller the seam allowance you want. Whenever there's any curves, we want to be sewing with less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance, anywhere down to 1/8. And I've got batiks here. Batiks don't have a lot of stretch in them, so they're a little more difficult than a real stretchy fabric. Now, when I did the other ones, I did run over to my ironing board to get this seam pressed nice and flat. Okay, and then remember, when you're doing an insertion, you lay your fabric on until you see what you'd like to see in your final piece, and then scooch it out that 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. So I think this would be pretty good. I wonder if I should. I want to make sure I get enough of a body in here, because dragonflies have a long body. And remember, you can cut. You don't have to exactly follow this edge. You can cut. Well, actually, you couldn't, but you can cut whatever you want into here as long as there's enough. As long as there's fabric underneath. And this is the joy of this technique, is that you can sew little smidgens of fabric in without ever having to handle a smidgen of fabric. Now, I found in the dragonfly bodies, it's kind of good to take a look here and make sure that they are. I've had trouble where my wings were off, but I think maybe that was because I didn't cut them well. In this block, you'd want your seam allowances pressed toward the wings so that the wings will stand up from the background. Okay, so the next exercise I wanted to show you, and this really pulls together a lot of the things that we've been discussing. So you can see these are really tall wetland grasses. And so I thought, since I already have a lot of these really tall ones, I thought I would make some shorter ones, and that would be good for demoing purposes too. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to show you is when you cut so many seams vertically, look how much that can shrink up, because you have all the seams this way. And yes, I'm going to have a lot of these units, but I'm probably going to have a leftover dragonfly anyway, so I'll need more. And remember, whenever you're cutting all the way from top to bottom, you really want you want these to be the same length. So I'm going to chop the top off here. I've got eight fabrics here, which is kind of a lot. And I think think I'll do shorter grasses like this. So it's less important that these all match out here. I mean, you want to make sure that you're going to have seam allowances, but, oh, all right. I'll follow my advice and trim them. But normally I just go for it because I'm a pretty impulsive person. So this is, making grasses like this is one of those things that you want to pay attention to, the order that you're cutting. So here's my cut one. And I want my grasses to, I want the points on my grasses. So there's my cut two. Well, let's see, I think my grasses are going to be blowing in the wind a little bit. On my previous ones, I didn't leave quite enough space in between, so I'm trying to pay a little more attention here to that. Okay, so that's my last cut. So we know what sequence we have to sew these back together in, and it's exactly the opposite of the way we cut it. So when I'm sewing stuff like this, I'm generally going to chain piece these together, which I'll demonstrate a little bit of the way. And then put your puzzle together. Oh, let me take this off of here. So you put your puzzle back together. You don't have to be super fussy about this because it's going to all work out. So normally I would keep piecing through this stack until I had them all done, paying attention that I've got green to blue and blue to green. When you work this way, with 8 in here, I'm going to get 4. In fact, I'm doing the exact opposite here. I'm doing, this would be the one that I would really want in my end unit, green reeds in a blue background, but I'm doing it the opposite here. But I would piece all through this stack and then go and start on this next one. And I could switch up the fabrics in here because any of them are going to fit together. Now, one thing you notice here is that I don't have, my curves aren't matching perfectly anymore. So best practice would dictate, if I want these to lie really flat, then I would go and recut this here. I don't worry about making these extra units because I'll use them somewhere. They could be, they might end up, these ones that are the blue grass and the green background might end up being chopped up into borders. Oh, I forgot to cut my cuts. All right, I'm going to do best. I'm having an odd day today because not only did I screw up the first stack, I think I forgot to push the record button to do this stack. So anyway, to backtrack a bit, I had initially made these very tall blocks to go with the dragonflies. And so now I'm going to do some shorter ones. These are the really short ones that I screwed up already. And so then I took this third stack, trimmed around all the way around so that they'd all be the same size, and then started cutting. And these are so this was cut 1. Let me put this back together. This was cut 1, and then you move this out of the way. And then this was cut 2. And cut 3. Cut 4. So I think I went wrong in there because I didn't design it initially, and really it is helpful to do that just so you see what's happening. So on this I want green grasses in a blue background, so maybe I'll save myself some frustration if I lay these out this way first. Okay, so because I cut from this direction to this direction, I want to piece back this direction. Look at these. Oh, wow. Okay, so normally when I would work, I would go and chain piece this whole stack together right through my machine so that I would sew all these units at the same time. And then they'd all be out here out the back of my machine somewhere. And here's another thing that you want to pay attention to is, do my curves still match? And because of that seam up there, they probably don't match exactly anymore. And if you're a perfectionist, you would like to go, and if you want your stuff to lie flat, you go and just recut at least that much of that seam. And I would chain piece all these onto it, so that when I'm done, they're all pieced. That's where I went wrong last time. I think that's how I screwed up in the first one, is normally those would all be pieced together. And I think I just picked up the wrong piece, I think. So I'll just sew one more of these on, and I think you get the idea. But maybe chain, because I always chain piece, maybe that's why I got mixed up, because the piece at hand was the wrong piece for me. Yeah, see, that stack wasn't out of the way. So I would just keep piecing all the way across here until I had all my grassy units together. And so I'm going to stop there, and I'd like you to give this a try with your dragonflies. And next week I'll show you what I come up with. So thanks very much, and happy sewing with no mistakes.